Hey everyone. Hi to David from 12 Football. Excited to have him because I messaged him like, I don't know, 5 times before we had this recording. So I feel amazed that I got him. David, just introduce yourself.
Well, thank you. You're very persistent, and I wanted to respond because you wrote such nice messages, so you persuaded me in the end. Yeah, so I'm David Sumpter. I'm a professor of applied mathematics, actually, as my normal
Mhm.
job, but I have somehow got involved more and more with working in football data analytics, and I'm also the co-founder of 12 Football, where we're building the smartest algorithms to analyze the game.
Okay, yeah, interesting background and like MS people in analytics. That's I think where actually the power comes from. All right, and tell us about your company. What do you do?
Well, we help football clubs win matches basically, and we help them in a very different way. Instead of like playing the game for them as the players, we help recruit players, find the best
Hmm.
players who can help them get better. We help them tactically, we help them develop better tactics
Hmm.
using analysis of the game. We help them break down the opposition.
Hmm.
So examine how the opposition are playing, find weaknesses in the opposition, and allow them to exploit those weaknesses. And then we also help with kind of overall decision making and planning of the club, like the financial decisions they have to make, the way they're developing, and the steps that they're taking in the future. So any question that a football club has and we think can be answered with data, and I think any question can be answered with data, then we provide the insight from that data to help answer it.
Really interesting. You've mentioned a lot of things that you help clubs with. We'll go deep into them, but in general, can we say that you are tailored solution for a sport club?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we do. So we often say this thing that every club is different. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's very true. I mean, not just, Real Madrid, of course, are different from a League Two club or a
Mm-hmm.
smaller Ukrainian club. You know, that every club is different. But Real Madrid are also different from Barcelona. There's a
Mm-hmm.
different culture there, there's a different way they want to play. And so what we do is we build models which are tailored to the way the teams want to play. And sometimes they want to play possession football like Barcelona. They want to play this kind of beautiful holding onto the ball, rolling it around. And sometimes they want to play also beautiful long ball football, find a tall guy in the penalty area, head it down and score from there. And we build models which allow them to understand those different ways of playing and then allow them to get better at them.
Interesting. Walk us through the process a little bit. Let's say I'm the coach and I want to play some kind of a style, right?
Yeah.
Because for me right now, from what I heard, it's really hard and complex mechanism to develop these algorithms around the coach. So
Mm.
walk us through how it works.
Well, it can be different in different cases, but
Mhm.
one thing we always do with coaches is we ask them how they want to play, and
Mhm.
then we start to set up metrics which describe the outcome if they're going to play the way they want to play. And so, for example, one coach I worked with early on in this process for Hammarby in Sweden, he wanted to always win the ball back quickly in the opponent's half. So he wanted to play a very intensive press, get the ball back quickly. And so we set up, you said you can have advanced models, but this was a simple model. You just say, do you win the ball back in 5 seconds of winning it, of losing it? So this is
Mhm.
Pep Guardiola's rule originally. I think
Mhm.
Jurgen Klopp has also talked about this, winning the ball back quickly after you lose it. And so we'd measure every time they lose the ball, how long was it until they won it back again? And that became a metric for measuring the success of the team over the season. And he could see, so he set up this is what I want to achieve. And then we could see, are you managing to achieve what you wanted to achieve? And even that is a help. It's a help both for the coach themselves to see that they're
Mhm.
following their plan, but it's also help for the club to evaluate if the coach is actually doing what he or she set out to do at the start. And then you can also look at more detail once you've got that process going. You can look at more detailed models where you maybe follow the positions of the players on the pitch and you
Mhm.
find out, well, who is in good pressing positions, which players are in good pressing positions, which ones aren't in, which ones are blocking passing lanes, which ones aren't. And from there, you can go really down into detail about how the coach is carrying out the plan.
Interesting. All right. So you mentioned that basically you ask the coach first, and then out of the his answer, you create the metrics, the models that will help him to understand what he wants, right?
Exactly. Yeah, well, you said, you asked me the question if you were the coach. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's different. Sometimes it's like the leadership of the club will come to us and say, we
Mm.
want to play this type of football. Find me a coach which does that. And that's something
Ah.
we've done several times that we've identified. We've been told, like, this is the style we want to play. These are the players we have. Who's the coach who's going to best fit into that style of play? And then we identify the coach by looking how did they change the style of play of other teams and so that they've managed. And that allows us to say, well, this coach would be better than that coach. If you want this, you should take this coach. If you want that, you should take this other coach.
Wow. And how did you measure the style of the coaches?
So you can look at like pressing intensity, for example. You
Hmm.
can look at how much they pass the ball, how they play out from the back, the goals and the expected goals of the team. And you can look, well, you can think of it like as a graph. It goes along like this, is like this was how the team was before the manager came in. And then as the manager came in, the team's pressing intensity maybe went up. And then you can see, well, that was the effect that the manager had on that particular team. And that allows you to see and judge what the effect is over and above what the players do themselves.
Yeah, but I'm interested. So you need the ton of data. Let's say you want to find
Yeah.
one coach, need to look over, let's say, 100 coaches, and as well, you need to also look the historical data on how they influence the team, right?
Yeah, well, I suppose that's the power of data. So we build algorithms which do that automatically. So they'll
Mm,
identify how how the coach changed the team, and they process all the data, and then we basically can find out for any coach in the world or any player in the world how they've affected the team that they're playing for or they're managing.
And where do you source this data?
So this data is often, and there's lots of different types of data. The most basic data is called event data, and
Mm-hmm,
somebody actually sits there and they mark all of the passes that the players have made, all
mm-hmm,
of the defensive actions and the pressures they've made, and they collect in all of that information manually. But more and more, this process is done automatically. So there's
mm-hmm.
tracking companies which track the positions of all of the players, and from there we can actually estimate that. So you can get the computer to track all the players and give us the data that we then.
Okay, so you're not doing the collection yourselves, but
No,
you're.
we don't. We call ourselves an insight company. So we
Mhm.
work together with the data collectors to take in their data and then give insight to the coaches. Because the thing is, there's an overload of data, right? There's
Mhm.
millions and billions of data points for football matches. Now, there's a company that are collecting a mesh over the body position of all of the players.
Mhm.
So you have like
Mhm.
this kind of really detailed data. So
Mhm.
it's getting more and more detailed, the level of data that we have, and then from that level of data we want to provide some insight, because having lots of numbers is one thing, but knowing how to press better, knowing how to find players who are good at passing the ball in certain situations, that's the insight that the coaches and the club leadership want to have.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, I understood. You're taking a lot of data points, and then you're asking the coaches, or let's say sport clubs, what they actually need out
Yeah.
of this, huge amount of data. By having a smart people like yourself, you are able to create tailored solution to each individual need.
Yeah, that's pretty much. You could write our web page for us now. That's really good. That's it's often. I mean, it can be a problem because sometimes the clubs don't know what they want,
Mm-hmm.
and so then we help them with that as well, like clearly defining their style of play and what they're trying to achieve. But yeah, that's the idea. I think that it really is a case that every football club is different and wants to have, they're all trying to solve different problems. And that's why I think, as a mathematician, it's very interesting because all of these different problems come up. It's not like
Mm-hmm.
solving the same problem over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're solving problems about goalkeeper kicks. Sometimes you're solving problems about defensive organization. Sometimes you're solving problems about finding a new coach. Every problem is different and every day is different, the types of things that we're solving.
Interesting. All right. So this is in terms of helping with performance, but you've mentioned that you help recruit players.
Yeah.
Tell us about this.
Well, it's very much like what I said with the manager, but in this case, what we've done is we've built categories of players. So is the player composed under pressure? Is the player good at getting into the box and receiving the ball? Is the player good at building up from their own half with offensive passes? Is the player very involved in defensive action? So we've built up each of those that I've listed there, we call them a quality. We've built up a list of 20 qualities
Hmm.
which summarize players, and then we can look to see how those qualities, we build metrics for each of those
Hmm.
qualities, so things we can measure, and then we put them together and we can build up an overall picture of the player. And
Hmm.
the thing that we've done, which is quite cool actually, is that we've built an AI which can talk to you about this. So I'm going to share the WhatsApp number with you afterwards, but we have a
Okay.
WhatsApp number and you just basically you can have a go at this and you can you type in the player that you're interested in and it will rank that player both in the data and it will give you a nice like spider graph of the data, but then it will tell you the strengths and the weaknesses of that player according to the data. And we've tested this out now with many people working in football, and they're just amazed that it's giving these precise descriptions of the players that they know very well. If they're great at building up with the ball, if they're good at pressing. Sometimes they disagree a little bit. They'll say, oh, there's this subtlety or that subtlety which it hasn't picked up. But overall, they're really impressed with the level of detail that it can tell you it. And it's kind of scary, right? Because it's a AI which is telling you about a football player things that you maybe didn't even know yourself.
Yeah, it is scary to be honest. Yeah, but I think that's really awesome having a WhatsApp bot, a huge and cool idea, especially like from my experience, coaches kind of don't like to use a lot of text. Like from
Yeah.
my experience, they would prefer just a WhatsApp quickly.
Exactly, and they're always on the go, right? So that's something we learned over the years. So at first we were like, "Oh, we've got this exciting computer program. You can see this," and they're like, they won't, they'll hardly open their computer. They don't want to be opening their, they like videos, but nothing more complicated than that. And so, and the other thing is they're always on the go. So if it's a coach, it's a scout, the chairman of the club, they're always like moving around, talking to people, and they're always WhatsApping each other. They spend all day WhatsApping each other. And so we said the only way to get their attention is if we build an AI WhatsApp who's going to talk to them, and then they can text this WhatsApp and get the information back. So that was a big focus, and that came out. We sort of released that, or we've released it. We still haven't gone out publicly with a number, but we're releasing the number to more and more people. We've got about 200 clubs have signed up for this now and are using it to scout players and get information. And we also, what we've done is we've priced this very low, so it's like 19 euros a month to get those types of reports. So it's like a normal subscription to something, and so anyone in the club can start to use it and get familiar with it. And then it doesn't solve all the problems. I've told you already about like finding new coaches. It doesn't solve every problem. We haven't built an AI which can solve every problem, but it can solve some of the scouting problems and the immediate information you want about players.
Interesting. Yeah, that's awesome idea. And are you looking forward to include videos maybe in this chat?
Absolutely. That's in the app, there isn't videos. But for example, when we're building up our opposition analyst now, so what we've done is, so that's a scout analyst. So you can think of what we deliver is more and more being AI analysts. So the one I've
Mm-hmm.
told you about on WhatsApp, that's a scout analyst.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have like an opposition analyst. And what that opposition analyst will do is analyze all the data and then produce video clips and text explaining where the weaknesses are in the opposition. So
Mm-hmm.
watch this space. There'll be quite a lot of video driven solutions in the future as well.
Interesting, interesting. And tell me this, right? So I've heard a lot of coaches complaining that we have too much data, like too much data, and that we don't even know what to do with this data.
Yeah.
So how is your data? You mentioned WhatsApp, you mentioned the platform, but my question to you is that how would you rate the simplicity of your outputs for a coach?
That's what I think that we're trying to specialize in. It's not always easy, but that is a massive problem. So now you see these football clubs, they have these big dashboards with like arrows and stuff going everywhere. We don't want to do that. We want to say, like, quick message, find me out about that player. How does the player play in plain English? And then when you're doing opposition analysis, how do you break down this team in plain English with some video clips? So instead of sitting there with like, a very complicated dashboard which someone has to put something together and try and explain something from, we want to actually produce the answers. So we really think of ourselves as doing insight AI. And it's a shame, but many companies, I think, deliver these lots of data. They think like the more complicated diagrams they have, the better it is, or, it shows that they're cleverer or something. What we think is clever is taking all of that complicated data and boiling it down to a simple message about, well, this is the manager you should use. This is why you should sign this player or why you shouldn't sign this player. This is how you should prepare for your next opposition. And that's a much more challenging problem from our side because we've got to do more work. But then it shouldn't be them that has to do all of the work. We should be giving them simple messages they can understand from all of this complex data.
Yeah, true. I think the complexity like kills like everything. Like if we even compare it to the tech world, right? Why Apple and iPhones are so popular? Because they're
Yeah.
easy, right?
Exactly, exactly. It's got to be easy. It's got to be easy to digest, and it's got to be delivered to you straight away. You
Uh-huh.
don't want to be sort of logging into a dashboard, finding out like, yeah, looking at all these complicated diagrams, trying to work out what that diagram means, where this thing's coming from. You want to have that information provided to you simply. And yeah, that's what I find as the most interesting challenge for me is taking that complex data and boiling it down to a simple message.
Yeah, that's the whole deal. And right, so you mentioned that you help recruit, you help find players. Coaches. You also help. Give us a couple examples. How do you help in decision making?
So you mean at the club level or something?
I mean, you've mentioned how you help with the decision helping in recruiting people, and that decision making involves recruiting, right? But
Yeah.
I'm more interested maybe in the actual games side of the
Yeah, yeah,
thing.
okay. No, that's a very good example. So we worked with one team on their defensive organization. So
Hmm.
what we could do, we could take the tracking data of the movement of all the players, and they wanted to defend in a very compact way. And what we could do is we could identify certain players who were out of position. So we have an algorithm that sees, are they keeping the defensive shape the coach wants? And the coach wanted to defend across a certain number of channels. If you think of the pitch as 5 channels, he wanted to defend across 4 of those channels, and the players should be in certain positions. And so we could identify when the players were out of position and then give them instructions about how to move back. And unfortunately, I can't say this was for a very big club, and I can't actually say
Hmm.
which club it's for, unfortunately, because we have to sign these sort of contracts. But this had a big effect on certain matches that they played and led to very big success because they could automatically identify where things were going wrong and then talk directly to the players. And they'd use our graphics to then explain to the players, well, you're out here, the algorithm says you should be here, and yeah, you weren't. So that was a very nice example of a success. I've actually worked when I can talk more about my work with Hammarby, the club we work with in Sweden, because we have a more open process with them. And there I've worked directly with the players. We'll show them, I sat with them and I would show them the runs they made and who'd passed who, and we go through the different passing situations and talk about their individual decision making. So it can
Hmm.
really go down to the level of the players.
Hmm.
Should you have made this pass? Should you have made this other
Hmm.
pass? And then it's very interesting to sit with those players because they have an incredible visual memory
Hmm.
for what happened during the match, and they can say why they made that decision, or many of them are like thinking through their decisions in a level that I didn't know that they did. There's some very clever football players, contrary to some of the stereotypes. You get some
Uh,
very clever football players, and they'll tell you, I was thinking this and I made that decision because of that. And then you can say, well, you saw there was this passing opportunity. You can see that. And it's a very helpful tool for discussing those types of decisions.
yeah, like look, I'm talking with you, and I love the technology you're developing, and when I'm talking with smart people, I'm getting this energy like, wow, how does it work? And I'm just amazed by your company, David, and you're doing awesome.
That's that's very nice. I mean, it's I find it very interesting to work with. I find football is interesting because it's kind of this endless stream of different problems that come in and you solve. So every day I'm doing something different or solving a different problem for a club. And that I find very interesting. And when I'm not solving a specific problem for a club, we're trying to put all of that information and knowledge into our AI so that we can automatically provide that type of information.
Okay, and tell us, how many clients do you have, like in
We
general?
have, I think, like 12, 13 clubs who we work with. We work with a
Hmm.
TV company as well, and then we work with a few brands on projects around that. So yeah, we're definitely growing, and
Hmm.
then so those are the clients who work with us in the way that we've talked about, like, where they come in and then we have some interactions with them. I can tell you about some of the teams we work with. We work with two teams in the Premier League, maybe three. We're starting up a project
Uh-huh.
with a third one. One of them is West Ham. I can
Uh-huh.
tell you about that. And we work with St. Pauli in Germany, who are a
Uh-huh.
very nice club to work with. And so we've helped them a lot with their transfers. Then we work with Athletic Club in Spain, and then we work with clubs. Well, we work one really nice club that we work with. We work with a club called RAL in
Hmm.
Belgium,
Hmm.
and they have come from a very low division. They started using our services for everything, for their set piece analysis, for their coaching, and they got promoted this season. There's
Hmm.
like all of these, there's these big stories, where we help a Premier League club, which is kind of cool, but then it's harder to talk about it. But then there's these sort of smaller stories about helping, Belgian second division clubs get up to the next level.
Interesting. All right, David. So a lot of interesting things to talk about, right? But we don't want to have our listeners being overwhelmed. So I have a blitz at the end. And be honest with me, who is your favorite club?
Well, before I got into this, I was always a Liverpool fan. So my
Okay.
favorite club is Liverpool. And it's also very nice because they have a great analytics department. So we don't work with Liverpool. And one of the reasons we don't work with Liverpool is that they already have two guys now, Will Spearman and Laurie Shaw, who are some of the absolute best. And they're both very good friends of mine. So it's very nice that they work there, and that's nice. But it does mean that I haven't had a chance to work with Liverpool because they're already doing great stuff over there.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Who are
gotcha.
you? Which team do you support?
Liverpool, don't
Okay.
believe me, Liverpool as well. Like from 2009 when they were, I'm sorry, Sox, I was supporting them.
Oh, well, that's great. No, I mean I've supported them from the great days down
Uh-huh.
to the
Uh-huh.
depressing days. I
Uh-huh.
think I was so yeah, I mean I supported them through the 80s when it was all really, really good.
Uh-huh.
And then yeah, it started to go very bad. But on the other hand, we had like when I was sort of 18, 19, we had some amazing players like Robbie Fowler, but some great
Uh-huh.
characters actually in the
Uh-huh.
team. And then Steven Gerrard for a long time.
Yeah.
And my son was born 5 days before the Champion League final in 2005.
Uh-huh.
So he wrote to Steven Gerrard because there's a story. I mean, this is terrible, but so I was so tired because when you've got a small baby,
Uh-huh.
and like so I was carrying him around and I was doing stuff, and then I started watching the first half of the Champions League final, and it was 3-0, and I was so depressed. So I just decided I'm not watching the rest of this. And I just went to bed because I was so tired from taking care of a baby. And then I wake up in the morning and my neighbor tells me about the result and I couldn't believe it. But the great thing is that I told this story to my son. I've told it to him many times. And when he was about 6 or 7, he wrote to Stephen Gerrard and he told him a bit of this story. And like he said, oh, I'm a big fan of yours and everything. And he drew a picture for him. He spent hours doing this. And then he got a signed letter back from Stephen Gerrard. So he has a signed picture on his bedroom wall from Stephen Gerrard. So that's a really nice Liverpool story.
Yeah, what a what an awesome person,
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, real hero. I mean, I think even when, yeah, even in the, yeah, I mean, there were some great victories during those times, but it was a bit hard watching Manchester United all those years do
Uh,
so well. But it's nice to see them back on top again.
yes, I mean, all right. So, who is your favorite player then?
Just now, yeah, I don't know. I think, yeah, I mean, it's hard not to say Mo Salah actually in that thing, just because I like him so much and my wife likes him so much. I think it's because he puts a lot of topless pictures on Instagram that my wife is so interested in him. But I think he's such a great character in a way. You know, he seems like such a great person as well as a great football player. And yeah, I mean, so he for me, he's the currently the biggest inspiration.
And
And
how?
then, I mean, then there's other players that I've met personally who I think are very good. We had a midfielder for Hammarby called Darian Bojanic. He's now playing in Korea, and I really loved him as a player and as a person. I like to say he wasn't so interested in being very fit. He found it very difficult to train hard, but he just had this beautiful way of passing the ball where he would always wait until there were two or three passing alternatives. He would look at one of those passing alternatives and pass to the other one. And he did this so consistently and so beautifully that I became a great admirer of him. And I don't know why he didn't. His physical attributes are left a bit to be desired, and he wasn't that interested, but he was so beautiful, a beautiful player at passing the ball.
Interesting. All right, David. So it was great to have you. We are about 30 minutes right now. So then tell us maybe any thoughts that you have left for our listeners that you want to share.
Wow, I don't know. I mean, now my wife has come home actually, and she's shouting on our dog. I don't know what sort of thoughts would they want to have. I mean, I think that football is fun, but mathematics is even more fun if you get into it. That would be my message. I don't know that it would go home with many people, but I have had a really interesting career and time through using mathematics to do different models, and I never knew that when I started studying maths and computer science that we'd end with all of these types of things. Now my wife is home. I'm doing a podcast just now. I'm meant to be giving some advice about how to be a happy person in the future. So my wife wonders why anyone's asking me that question.
All right. All right. Yeah, David. So thank you so much, and it was great to have you.
It was fantastic to do this. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for all the questions.